Hello, my Bill 1000 Nation. How's everyone doing today? Hopefully, everyone's having a great day. If not, I hope it gets better from here. We are back with another Coffeehouse Crime. This one was titled, Obsessed Killer X Tries to Flee. Doesn't know he was recorded. Oh, that's going to be... Alright, I'm excited to get into today's story. If you guys are excited as I am, please go ahead, turn them lights down low, put on something comfy, cup of something special. Let's get intrigued.
What would you do if a partner you were seeing suddenly became possessive, obsessive, and outright violent towards you? When 22-year-old nursing student Haley Anderson found friendship with Orlando Tercero, she had no idea how desperately...
I mean, a little obsessiveness is expected. You know, some of those things are a little expected. But, obsession and all that shit can get very carried away, very out of hand, very fast. It is a very, very slippery slope and very dangerous. But I mean, if you truly love someone, I mean, you got a little bit of an obsession with them and everything else. The violence, though, damn.
he would cling to her, and sadly, all of this would end in the most horrific of ways. But who was Orlando? How did he manage to flee the country? And how would his unique circumstances make this case so complicated in the courtroom? Welcome back to Coffeehouse Crime, folks. My name is Adrian, and today we're traveling to New York State to look at how a tumultuous obsession turned into a tragic horror story. It was in March of 2018 that the city of Binghamton woke up to some very distressing news. But by the time the authorities realized who the killer was, he had already fled the country.
Oh,
and what happened next was very complex and situational. By the way, Coffeehouse Crime is all about true crime, strange and chilling stories. So if you'd like to see more stories like this one, please consider subscribing. It really does help me out. Thank you. And now, with that said, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Haley Anderson.
And if you're going to go ahead and grab that coffee, you need to put in something nice. Go ahead and grab you a B5 Nation mug, bro. Oh, it's got some Cinnabon coffee in there with a little bit of Cinnabon creamer. I'm in fat boy paradise right now, y'all. You don't even know. Oh, but definitely go over, check out the B5 Nation store. Got some amazing stuff, dropping new stuff all the time, and you should really go check out the Discord too. Yeah.
As a pesky Brit, when I hear the words New York, I immediately think of the Big Apple. But today, we're traveling 170 miles northwest to a small city named Binghamton, found in New York State. Thanks to its beautiful Victorian architecture, well-kept neighborhoods, pristine zoos, and conservation efforts, Binghamton has been given the well-deserved nickname of Parlor City. With a population of just under 50,000 residents, it's a tiny city surrounded by beautiful American countryside. The city experienced its glory days as a manufacturing hub in the late 1800s, when cigars and shoes made the town well known across the country. Recently, its economy has relied on services to help keep it afloat, predominantly specializing in healthcare and education. That's where Binghamton University comes in, and is home to approximately 18,000 students, therefore making it, quite obviously, a massive part of the city's population. Self-described as the best public university in the Northeast, it is a world-class institution that offers students a broad, interdisciplinary education with an international perspective. The university does seem to be ranked quite highly by students too, so it appears that Binghamton is a great place to achieve your degree. However, on March the 9th, 2018, an alarming discovery rocked the university to its very core and left the city of Binghamton in horror. When 22-year-old student Haley Anderson failed to return to her student accommodation, her roommates became concerned. Now, Haley was both punctual and very good friends with them, so they immediately recognized the unusual behavior. It was on the morning of March the 8th that several of them noticed her failing to reply to any of their text messages. By the time the evening came around, that realization had turned to anxiety when their phone calls were left unanswered too. Their fears were perpetuated when she failed to attend a poetry class that night, and that was finally enough for her friends to act. Now, thankfully, Hayley was smart, and she knew how important it was to share her location with her girlfriends. As a result, she had installed Find My Friends on her iPhone, essentially allowing her trusted people to know where she was at any given time of the day. And that is when they realized that her iPhone's last known location was not in the comfort of her own home, but instead at her ex-boyfriend's apartment. An ex-boyfriend who had demonstrated concerning behavior on multiple occasions in the past. Taking matters into their own hands, they traveled to his apartment to find out what was going on. But the story would only get stranger from here. When they arrived at the apartment, they realized that not only were the lights turned off and the doors locked, but her ex-boyfriend's car was not in the driveway, and so they decided to break in through his window. But this would only lead to the most horrific of discoveries, because after breaking in, they found their best friend's lifeless body in his bedroom. Of course, naturally, they dialed 911 immediately. Now, trust me, this story only gets more peculiar from here. But before we carry on with what happened next, let's first take a look at who Hayley was and where she came from.
Oh yeah, get
Born
us
on May
really,
9th,
really attached to her.
1995,
Make it more
Hayley
hard.
was the youngest of two daughters.
More difficult.
Growing up in Westbury, she lived about 200 miles southeast of the university and much closer to New York City. Here, she grew up alongside her father, Gordon, mother, Karen, and older sister, Madeline. Hayley was well known for her sense of humor and often cheerful self. She was hardworking, loved music, and was compassionate to all that she knew. So it's no surprise to learn that she made many friends wherever she went, and wasn't afraid to speak her mind. In the year 2013, it was finally time for Hayley to fly the nest and begin university. I'm sure this was tough for her parents, but as always, you eventually do have to find your own way. Being the caring and compassionate young woman that she was, she naturally decided to study nursing. And so, later that year, she joined Binghamton University to embark on a 5-year nursing degree. And it looks like Hayley had a taste for the finer things in life too. She knew how to make a good cup of coffee, and while attending university, she worked at Jasmine's on-campus coffee shop. Now, of course, this was only to get her by while she was studying, because Hayley already had a job lined up with Northwell Health Hospital, where she would have worked in the emergency rooms after graduating. As a young and confident woman exploring her university years, Hayley was comfortable to date other men on campus. And during her final years, that is when she met another student named Orlando Tercero. But Orlando was a bit of an odd one, to say the least. With dual citizenship from Nicaragua, he spent the second half of his life in Miami, and so, as a result, he found himself flying between both countries relatively often. Friends described Orlando as kind and someone who always found a way to make you laugh. And apparently, he was both caring and respectful. However, saying that, this is where problems in Hayley's life slowly began to form, because moving forward, she would embark on a relationship with an obsessive demon in disguise. Now, despite enjoying Orlando's company, Hayley was not prepared to anchor herself to anyone while at university.
Smart.
This included her actual ex-boyfriend, Kevin. In fact, she had even met Orlando through him. For the record, Orlando knew Hayley's conditions. She had made them very clear to him. But unfortunately, he did not accept her freedom, and that is where the problems began. Although they did have good moments together, Orlando became furious at Hayley whenever she hung out with other men or her ex. In fact, he would often show up at her house uninvited, sit on her porch, and smoke a cigarette. Sadly, this sort of behavior would escalate over the months. In September 2017, Hayley woke up to find that all of her car's tires had been slashed. This resulted in over $600 worth of damage, which is a lot of money for a student.
Yes,
this clearly was a targeted
anyone,
attack,
bro.
And Hayley was confident that it was
I don't even
Orlando
have
who
$600
was to
laying
blame.
around.
Now,
I wish.
Hayley had a
I
hunch it
would
was
love
him
it.
because she had just spent the
Broke
night with
as a
her ex,
motherfucker.
Kevin, and Orlando, he knew about this too. And as we already know, he was the extraordinarily jealous type. Following his outburst, she recorded the entire incident on Snapchat. Apparently, Orlando then responded by saying that his tires had been slashed too. I mean, what a coincidence, what are the odds, right? She then told him that she was going to file a police report down at the local station, to which Orlando replied with, "I don't think that's a good idea." Furthermore, he himself never reported his incident to the police. Now, Haley knew that if she were to press charges against Orlando, he likely would have been kicked out of university, and so, in an effort to preserve his career, she decided not to. Now, hindsight is always 20/20, but Haley, she really didn't want to be cruel to Orlando. So, instead of showing him the door, she kept him in her life. Now, it's not clear to me if they remained as just friends after this, or if there was something more going on in the background. However, it did become evident to friends that they were still spending one-on-one time together. And tragically, this would end in the most horrific way imaginable. Leading up to the night of her death, Haley was in the final months of university, and I'm sure many of us can remember those bittersweet moments. It was on the evening of March the 7th, 2018, that Haley and a few friends made themselves cozy at home, opened a bottle of wine, and played several board games late into the night. Haley spent most of her evening and early morning here. However, at around 3 AM, she decided to meet with Orlando, with all of their movements being captured by a surveillance camera next door from his property. She travelled to his off-campus apartment, where the two then entered his home at 3:15 AM. It is not entirely clear what happened over the next several hours, but tragically, Haley was strangled to death during that time frame. It is assumed that Orlando murdered her out of jealousy, because if he couldn't have her, well, then no one could. Approximately 7 hours later, at 10:48
If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it was meant to be. Tattoo that shit on your forehead, motherfucker.
AM, a surveillance camera recorded Orlando leaving his apartment alone. He returned a few minutes later with melatonin and Z-Quil, both of which are used to assist sleeping disorders. And spoiler alert, the reason why he purchased these were not for the right intentions. Several hours later, he was captured leaving the apartment to go to his basement, where he is believed to have found several eye hooks before returning upstairs. Orlando then wrote a letter in Spanish saying, "I never imagined doing this. I'm sorry. Father, I'll see you soon." For reference, his father died several years prior, indicating that he likely meant that he would see him in heaven or hell soon. It is believed that he then screwed these hooks into a door frame and tried to hang himself using his own tie. However, due to bad luck or just fate, he fell and smashed his head instead. And although blood was observed in the hallway, Orlando did in fact survive the fall. Instead of trying again, he decided to change his plans. That is when he packed up his bags, bandaged his head, and made his way to JFK International Airport. And while there, he boarded a plane heading home to Nicaragua, hoping to evade the authorities forever. By now, friends were becoming highly concerned over Haley's welfare. As we already know, they used the Find My Friends app to try and track her down, which of course led them to Orlando's apartment. With no lights on and no car in the driveway, they decided to break in through the window, which, sadly, is when they then found her lifeless body. And although many of them were wondering where Orlando was, he was long gone. After arriving at the crime scene, officers then sectioned off the entire area. But the one peculiar detail here, which is highly concerning and a little bit baffling, is this was not the first time they were at the property this day. It turns out that, shortly after murdering Haley, Orlando then messaged his sister to say that he had done something terrible, and that, furthermore, he was a disgrace to the family. Being naturally concerned for her brother, she contacted the police to ask for a welfare check at his property. However, after knocking on his front door and being met with silence, the officers simply walked away instead. And of course, Binghamton police then returned a few hours later, this time equipped with the knowledge that there was a lifeless body in his bed. However, by the time they'd connected the dots and finally placed Orlando as a suspect in Haley's death, he was already long gone and out of the country.
We are learning new details today about the man wanted for questioning in the suspicious death of a Binghamton University student. Police identify him as Orlando Tercero. He is also a Binghamton nursing student and the ex-boyfriend of 22-year-old Haley Anderson. Police found Anderson's body on Friday at an off-campus home. They want to question Tercero, but say he fled to Nicaragua before authorities found her body.
What the fuck?
So, this is where our story becomes a little more complicated when compared to other cases of murder. You see, if a person suspected of murder is detained in the same country where the crime happened, then quite simply, they can be tried according to the country's judicial system. If not, then most countries have extradition agreements in place in the event that the suspect flees. However, this is solely dependent on the relationship between both countries. In Nicaragua's case, there is no treaty in place with the United States, so technically, Orlando was a free man because he was a dual citizen of both countries with no need for extradition. Put simply, Nicaragua did not have to extradite him back to the United States. And so, this was a very uncomfortable situation for Haley's family. And this certainly was the concern of many officers involved in this case too. In fact, several detectives were openly pessimistic about it. The decision with what to do with Orlando would ultimately come down to the Nicaraguan government. And in the meantime, Haley's family and American detectives would all have to wait in the storm of anticipation and anxiety. Meanwhile, forensic officers back in America were hard at work in determining Haley's manner of death. An autopsy conducted on her body concluded that she had died from asphyxiation via compression of the neck. Furthermore, she had visible bruising around the neck and the arms. And it was also determined that she had died during the time she was with Orlando, which of course was calculated through the various surveillance footage clips left behind. Meanwhile, Orlando had successfully returned to his family's home country, and after being picked up by his mother at Managua's International Airport, they then returned to his childhood home. It is not clear how much she knew about her son's actions back in Binghamton, but Orlando was looked after over the next several days despite an international notice being released to the authorities. However, his freedom would ultimately be short-lived, because only a few days later, and after traveling to a hospital in the city of Leon, Orlando Tercero was identified and finally arrested. Back at home, Binghamton University was mourning the loss of their student, peer, and friend. Haley Anderson's death caused widespread grief across campus, with Monday classes cancelled for senior nursing students in the wake of her murder. University President Harvey Stenger and nursing head Dean Mario Ortiz released multiple statements, mourning the loss of Haley's death and extending condolences to her friends and family. Through the pain, sadness, and devastation, it was clear that Haley's friends, family, and fellow students all wanted only one thing from here. And that was justice against the monster who was responsible for her death. And with the public now aware that he had fled back to Nicaragua, all eyes were on the Nicaraguan authorities and how precisely they would respond. But first, Orlando would face some time in a psychiatric hospital after attempting to take his own life yet again. However, once given the all-clear, he was then moved to the Directorate of Judicial Assistance, also known as El Chipote in Managua.
Sorry, I'm just saying, like, save everyone a lot of time and hassle.
The United States would initially respond by requesting that Nicaragua extradite Orlando back to the US to face charges of second-degree murder, which in New York State is punishable by up to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years behind bars. But unfortunately, Nicaragua ultimately rejected this request, which of course infuriated Haley's family and friends. However, they announced that they would try him in his own home country instead, and Orlando was charged with 1 count of femicide, which by the way is not recognized in the US. The definition of femicide is generally considered to involve the intentional murder of a woman by a male aggressor, and of course, the motive behind that can vary quite drastically. In Orlando's case, the motive was considered to be jealousy. After getting close to Haley, he refused to let her go, and those bottled up emotions eventually resulted in violence. During his trial, Haley's mother and friends confirmed that Orlando was obsessive and possessive with Haley. They made it clear that he would not leave her alone, often shouted at her, and of course, even slashed her tires. Investigators claimed that he had likely murdered Haley out of jealousy after coming to terms with the fact that she would never solely be his. And this corroborated sufficiently with his possessive behavior, which was confirmed by multiple sources. Her final autopsy result concluded that she had died from asphyxiation by neck compression. With this happening inside Orlando's home and the surveillance footage available, it was almost indisputable that he was the one to murder her. But Orlando...
Was it because, like, that's the hottest girl you've ever been with, and you're like, oh no, I'll never get another one so pretty? Bro. I don't understand it. Look, evidently she just wanted to live that typical college girl life, man. Let her have her fun before she gotta get out into the real world, get a job, do whatever the fuck it is she's gonna do, either have a family or whatever. She's sowing her oats while she can before it's too late. And you needy ass piece of shit. I hate this motherfucker. I really do.
He seemed to have other plans in this trial. Despite being guarded by officers with AK-47s, he appeared to be disinterested, disheveled, and remarkably unfazed by everything around him. He also claimed that he was insane at the time of her death, due to the amount of alcohol he had consumed that night. I mean, sure, Orlando, alcohol-induced insanity is a perfectly acceptable excuse. You are now free to go. Orlando claimed that he did not remember murdering Haley and that he must have been in a trance at the time of her death. However, when asked if this had ever happened to him before or after the night of Haley's death, he was unable to provide any evidence. Now, the very surprising thing here is that many of Orlando's friends from school in Nicaragua did not believe he had murdered Haley. To them, he was just a sweet, gentle guy who loved her, and there was no way that he was responsible. Many of them still don't believe he is guilty, with some saying that there were no indications that he was possessive. However, it is kind of obvious to assume that, of course, they would have had no way of knowing these details. I mean, it's not like Orlando was going to be honest and tell them. And unfortunately, some of those friends still believe he is innocent to this very day. Anyway, after a mere 1.5 hours of deliberation, the lone judge who was fully responsible came back with her verdict. And no surprise, thankfully, she found Orlando Tercero to be guilty of femicide. As a result, he was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison, which, by the way, is the maximum sentence possible for femicide in Nicaragua. As expected, Orlando was not happy with the result, and only 1 year later, he requested to have another psychiatric evaluation. However, thankfully, the court would ultimately reject this appeal, and Orlando still faces 3 decades behind bars to this day. To rub salt into his wounds, an arrest warrant has officially been released by Broome County's district attorney, and they have also promised to request him to be extradited back to the US once his sentence in Nicaragua finishes. And so this means that, despite spending 30 years behind bars, if he is ever to set foot in America again, he will likely have to face a second trial. Now, I don't quite know how it works with dual sentences over the same murder, but I'm guessing it's likely life minus 30 years. Which, you know, is still life. With Orlando's conviction, perhaps Haley's loved ones can finally find the peace and closure they deserve. She is remembered as a beautiful, intelligent, and friendly girl who touched many people's lives. And personally, I think her parents should be very proud of the young woman she became. In her honor, her father picked up her diploma upon her late graduation, and to this day, she is fondly remembered by all who knew her. You know, I find it kind of funny that, although he tried to run away from his crimes, he actually probably received a larger sentence than if he had stayed in America. And I'm also guessing that the prison system in Nicaragua is probably much more brutal and violent. You know, no matter how many times I researched this case, I still find it absolutely insane how so many of his friends still believe he is innocent. Like, guys, stupid, come on, he's literally a convicted killer here. Wake up. I think the senselessness of it all is what really gets me here too. I mean, there was absolutely no benefit to murdering Haley. Orlando's motive really was just raw, spiteful jealousy. I do greatly respect Haley's friends for breaking into his apartment though, because true friends really do stick together, and they were not prepared to leave her alone. Anyway, folks.
But that also just answered your question on why his friends are still having his back, because true friends will have your back even if they are like, yeah, you probably did it, but what if you did? I got your back, buddy. You know what I mean? You can't sit there and bash his friends for having his back when he's going through all this shit and, you know, be like, but her friends having her. It don't work that way. Friends have your back no matter what. That's just how it is. Oh my God, this was an amazing fucking story. Coffeehouse Crime. Coffeehouse Crime, man. I'm telling you what, I always leave one of these episodes more fucked up than what I was going into it. I really enjoy them though. If you enjoyed today's story as much as I did, please go down there, leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. While you're down there, if you want, go on over, slap that subscribe button, become part of the Built for 1,000 Nation. We do some crazy stuff here. And if you want to know when that crazy stuff happens, ding that bell. It might work for you. It might not. Probably don't. But if it do, jump in on one of my premieres and be like, hey, Bill, I just joined your Discord. And I'm having a blast talking to everyone. I'm going to be like, hell yeah, bud. Leave a like and dip. That's all you got to do. If you really want to, support the channel, go over and check out the B5 Nation store. Got some amazing merch. Get beautiful coffee cups. Dropping new designs all the time. Handmade a rhyme. As always, be good to one another. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Damn, Adrian. That was fucked up, bro.